Welcome to the Intelligent Automation News Meetup. We're here to explore the cutting edge of automation technologies and their impact in the world. My name is Jesse Tutt, and today we've got a special guest, the guest strategic leader, WonderBotz, which is an award-winning automation advisory firm. Paula is a coach and a mentor and super passionate about delivering intelligent automation solutions. She's active on a ton of different platforms, and she's the business development partner at WonderBotz, which is great. She's got a strong background in process improvement and enterprise automation, and really look forward to having her. And one other plug too is that you've got the bits about Watts. I got that correct, which is another thing definitely worth checking out. So yeah, I'd like to welcome Paula, and thanks so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
Thanks so much for that warm introduction, Jesse. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. As Jesse mentioned, I am responsible for business development and marketing at WonderBotz, but I actually come from an operational background. I did process improvement for companies like ThyssenKrupp Elevator, BlackBerry, and my last post before I got into the sales side of my career was actually at Donnelly, where I actually saw end-to-end processes through M&A transactions and some of the hiccups that organizations tend to not see when different lines of business have to collaborate and communicate. So I'm thrilled to join from both those perspectives, both from an intelligent automation practitioner. I do have, some development chops, not as much as you guys though. But what I really think is going to be valuable and where I focus today's presentation is on how we as practitioners, how you as COE leaders, how intelligent automation folks can really understand where the monetization of these technologies come in. And what does that mean, right? We have AI that comes on the scene, and suddenly we're supposed to figure out how to budget for that, right? And we still have to keep the lights on with our intelligent automation programs. So today's presentation is really going to be focused on what it is that this little term that I like to call rising robot. Okay, and so bear with me
Perfect.
as I get this Zoom set up. Are you guys able to see my screen? I get a
Yep,
thumbs up.
and we can.
All right, fantastic. Perfect. All right. So I think what we're entering now, as AI has kind of hit the scene is what I like to call an AI infusion, right? There's a lot of hype in the market. There's a lot of organizations claiming to be in their pilot phases and or exploratory phases, even thinking through case studies. And so this little timeline, fun fact, I'm also a history major, which has absolutely nothing to do with where my career track led. But what it's done is it's given me the opportunity to look at things from building blocks, right? And so if we look at, in 1954, the first industrial robot came to pass, right? So if we look at, optimization of core business processes from the industrial revolution through to AI, generative AI, what we're looking at today, there's not that much of a difference in the application. It's about how quickly the adoption is and how quickly organizations are saying, okay, I'm not going to wait and let the other guys do it, right? It's tried and true. So if we follow this from left to right, you'll see a pattern. And it's what I always, say to anybody that's considering intelligent automation and folks that are in the career trying to understand how to, get your next promotion, become, there's titles like chief automation, officer now. And as the rise of AI has sort of given us this new lens of what a career path would be, the technology, I think, also correlates with what leaders are looking to hire and what they're looking for in the future of work. The common denominator across the board is data. Data is king in every organization. What they're trying to do is expose, transmit, and process tremendous amounts of data. And what we've done with applications emerging over the time, and if you look kind of into the 1990s with the emergence of ML, RPA, and sophisticated AI application, what that really means is that we were able to look at tremendous amounts of data and say, okay, how can we get that from point A to point B faster? How can we do it without any snags? What do we do to remove human error from these models, right? And then it began to create what we now, refer to as RPA, which is, a lower code version of what automation is. Moving along, we had the advent of organizations and players like Blue Prism, right? And UiPath then came on the scene and several disruptors to that low code, no code space. Companies like RoboCore. We have companies like, Mendix that came on the scene, right? And everyone was trying to do the same thing. which was optimize business processes from the lens of a business leader, right? So folks that are not technologists, they don't care about how the cake is made. They just want to know that it's going to taste like vanilla and the frosting's going to be something they like, right? And that same is true of business leaders applying technology to their organization. They don't need to understand the underlying code technology. They just need to know that the outcomes are sound and that outcomes are going to be exactly what it is that they're aiming to do. My process background gave me a unique opportunity to learn reverse engineering in process. Okay. And so, what that allows me to do is see from the lens of the CFO who wants his invoices calculated, from the HR, leader who wants to make sure that she has a demographic understanding of who is in her organization. From the perspective of an operations leader that wants to know if his distribution channels and the supply chain that he's managing is efficient, it's optimized, and it adheres to the SLAs that his contracts have presented, right? And so in order to do all of that, it takes a tremendous amount of data. And we kind of got to a place, later in kind of the 2010, 2000, sort of, kind of coming up on the pandemic era, where organizations, big organizations, Goldman Sachs, for example, did a huge data lake in Utah, because they said we have a tremendous amount of data from all the different systems that we've had. Well, how do we pull the spaghetti apart, and make it make sense? And that's really where the evolution of automation continues to thrive and drive data transparency and the ability to make decisions on that data that the machines can expose far better and far crisper than human intervention can. And of course, here we are in the age of generative AI. So now machines are making machines, right? So now we've gotten to the point where it's not just about low code and where the human in the loop begins and ends. We're at the point where machines are creating code. Machines are giving us predictive and prescriptive ideas of what's next based on historical data. Now, there's a lot of questions about how this comes to pass and what we're supposed to do as far as governance goes. There's a lot of speculation and questions about that. And I've addressed a few of these in this presentation. I speak to analysts as part of my charge every day. In fact, I have a vendor briefing tomorrow over the future of IDP, intelligent document processing, right? Because as the ingestion of data gets more sophisticated, the tools also have to match, right? And so digital readers have come a long way from OCR, optical character recognition, extracting from structured data, really being able to take even an email and understand the sentiment behind what the user or the consumer or the client, in whatever case it is trying to convey. So it's a really exciting time. And if you look at the historical progression there, the time keeps getting smaller, right? The next evolution of automation continues to happen faster. And it's up to us to read the pulse of the market and continue to address it and respond accordingly. A couple stats from some of the research that I've done that I think are of interest, right? And I think it's important, no matter what role you play in an organization, to understand what your contribution does to the context of what your organization is trying to do, right? So if we take a look, there's another big bank, and I focused a little bit on banks because they were early adopters. So there's some of the ones that are early adopters in this Gen AI space as well. But they're completely convinced that AI will be transformational even more than anything that we've seen in hundreds of years, right? So, and again, the printing press, steam engine, these are some of the metaphors that they use, right? To say modernization is here and the impact is going to be great, right? Just like we went from horses to cars once upon a time, now we're going from business processes being mapped on a Visio diagram through to automation that's coded and transformational in nature. Our job as humans is to be intrinsically human. Where do we teach and train, not only the AI models, but the machine learning, right? So that we can get to the outcomes that we're desiring. And again, it's important for us to understand the context of our jobs within our organization to be able to make that impact and to not add extra spaghetti code to the mix, right? It's our job to simplify and optimize. If we take a look at the Gen AI opportunity radar, I really like the way that they broke this out. It gives us an opportunity to see that this isn't just about the back office. I think a lot of us have, as RPA practitioners, as automation practitioners, intelligent automation, I think we've been through many, many labels, right? Hyper automation, I think, had its turn at one point. But if we talk about just really what we're trying to do, right, is achieve better business outcomes through the use of technology. right? There is a common denominator here in Gen AI. Now, back office is always a great place to start. Why? Because it cuts costs, right? And it's a part of the organization that isn't generating revenue, right? So wherever you can keep opportunity costs down, the better. But what's really cool about what Gen AI has been able to do is since it doesn't have any impact on a system necessarily transmitting data or information that can go to another line of business, we're able to find tons of new use cases that we never thought possible just by, evaluating and seeing, how long does the month close take, right? How long does it take for us to onboard a vendor? Some of these traditional questions that we would ask to build pipeline and automation are a thing of the past. We're now able to take a look at the opportunities and really see that there's examples in the front office, products and services, core capabilities, and everyday AI is what I like to call it now. It's not just about the back office. It's not just about what you're doing in your organization today. It's about what you're able to do and transmit in your day to day interactions with clients, right? With consumers, with vendors. So this paradigm really gives us the opportunity to see that they actually all connect and they always have, right? So here's a practical example. If traditionally we were trying to figure out, let's say, what kind of colors do we want to wrap our Hershey Kisses in? Okay, so Hershey's is one of our clients, and they have to think through, Valentine's Day. In the United States, we love a good Valentine's Day moment, right? So on Valentine's Day, we have to have pink Hershey Kisses, we have to have red Hershey Kisses, or we have to have, varying colors of SKUs. Well, each one of those represents a different SKU that they have to think through. Well, somebody on product marketing might have thought it was a great idea to have red and pink Hershey Kisses at Valentine's Day, but the data might say otherwise, right? In the day to day review of how much it costs to drop ship the Hershey Kisses, make sure that they have the aluminum foil that's color coded appropriately for the holiday, and then get it on the shelves in a merchandising format to where it's able for consumers to consume. That is something that data gives us information on, right? And with that data, then comes the decision to say, okay, maybe it's a game changer for us to just stick to red at Valentine's Day because the game changing side of this paradigm says that red can be leveraged again at Christmas time. And better yet, if we get smarter about our distribution channels because we see what people are consuming, maybe it's the other way around. And maybe the red Hershey Kisses at Christmas are part of what we overstock on the aluminum foil that we make so that the Hershey Kisses that we make by February and Valentine's Day are leveraging that same production value, right? So just a very simple example of where generative AI was able to ingest information that's historical of one of our clients and make not only an everyday AI decision, but a game changing AI decision, and henceforth, maybe pink isn't necessary. Maybe red's the answer, right? So just practical example of how these are able to not only address the P&L on the back side of the office, right? At the back of the house, the administration and the distribution and the operation, but then the front facing side as well. We still get the warm and fuzzy data demographic information that said that people love their red Hershey Kisses and they love having them holiday special. Well, we get to achieve both with the use of Gen AI to make strategic decisions. A couple of activities that IT leaders have had to kind of embark on to get ready for AI success. And the reason that I'm really focused on AI today is not just to give into the hype, but it's because I truly believe that the foundation that we've set in intelligent automation and RPA has structured our processes, systems, or at least given us exposure to what our organizations are actually doing today so that we're ready for tomorrow, right? And so, some of the things that IT leaders have to continue to focus on and understand is that AI ready security. It's the biggest question we get when folks are thinking about what they're going to do next. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for COE leaders and practitioners like you guys to be able to take this, take the reins on this one and say, you know what, when folks were afraid of how robots would interact with their core systems, this is what we addressed it with. The same is true of AI, right? Now, some of the data and information that usually takes a little bit of finessing and understanding where it is that that's going to start and stop as far as governance, right? Not everybody's able to see things, but the same principles that we applied to governance and automation are true there. AI ready data. So we talked a little bit about this already, that making everything as structured, as visible, as fluid as possible, it's a great start. AI is able to kind of overpass and overcome any unstructured data as well. The throughput, however, might leave us some little, spaghetti strings and trails that we need to sort on the back end. But really what this has enabled us to do is have a higher throughput with AI ready data. And even if we haven't gotten our data structured, there's still a great place to have a starting point. So understanding where your data readiness is a really great place to kind of be. One of the things that we recommend to our clients is for each line of business to understand the systems, the data, and the governance of that data, right? As you kind of embark on this. A lot of organizations are doing what we call AI user groups or AI summits, right? And it's born of a traditional COE where they're coming together and saying, all right, well, let's see what places that we could potentially start. Who wants to be an early adopter in our organization, right? And are we ready? And then really understanding once that council or once that, kind of governing body sort of comes together, almost like a mini little board internally, right? It's important to define what the AI principles are. An organization in healthcare might have a very strong stance on not using outside information to pull through, because there's very sensitive data. Another organization in operations might say, you know what, we really want to understand what other competitors are doing. So we do want to connect to a large language model that's maybe on the World Wide Web so that we can really see what competition is doing. And then another example in the education industry, WonderBotz has several, higher education clients. They're not competitive of each other, on the sporting events, yes. But as it relates to education, most of them are trying to do the same thing with the back office. So we've actually seen a lot of clients share the knowledge on what they're learning from AI and intelligent automation along the way. And so really understanding what that AI principle is going to be. More data, the better, right? If we have more data, then AI models are able to make better decisions, bigger decisions, and then we know that there's not as much of a bias, right, to the amount of data that we're giving it. So these are some of the three things, kind of the 1-2 punch of some of the places where you should think it through. So diving a little deeper into the AI strategy and the things that should be considered, right? And I think none of this should come as a surprise, at all. But these are some of the areas that, the strategy needs to kind of take into consideration. So we've talked a lot about data consolidation and data readiness, right? I think those go without saying. Even if your organization isn't ready to start the AI strategy, these are areas where it should be known that we are kind of understanding what the organization looks like and how the operating model is going to be exposed to be in the future. Right. So some of the strategies that go into data consolidation and data readiness is redundancy. So it's nice to see where it is that data is being stored, housed, and moved. Is that being done from different systems? So, for example, I recently at WonderBotz realized that we had two project management systems that were being used, right? So, my delivery department was using I think it was Monday.com or something like that, right? They had a system that they were doing that they were ingesting information about what was next for a task, to cross different pillars of the organization and make sure that everybody was up to date, up to speed, and knew what was next, right? And my team in marketing and business development was using a product called ClickUp. Why are we using both of these, right? So the product does the same thing. And the data that it's pulling is somewhat similar in some instances, because in the case of marketing, we were extracting the client's stories, right? And some of the AI value that the delivery teams were putting into the system to tell us what they did, what the ROI was, how it communicated. And so then that data was being transmitted to us, jumping out, in an Excel spreadsheet where somebody else was putting it into the system. Well, that's not very smart, right? How can we claim to be AI ready when our data is being stored in two different places? Totally not optimized. It's a very micro example, but it's very poignant. And a lot of organizations have this issue at scale. Some of the places where we've seen a lot of data readiness opportunities is where there's uses of tools like Blackline or Trintex, some of these reconciliation tools. But then maybe automation is also storing, governing, housing some of the information or what's necessary to do that reconciliation, right? So it's very important to make sure that data is consolidated and thereby ready for whatever it is that we're going to process it to do. All right. Then there's this notion of incremental AI. This is kind of baby steps into the world of AI, right? And incremental AI gives us the opportunity to see what it looks like. One of the most common use cases right now for incremental AI is what we call chat with your data. So one of our clients is a law firm. They have a tremendous amount of contracts and briefs, as you can imagine, that they have to pine over, sort through, and make sure that they're adhering to what their clients need and or what their clients have agreed to, right? In any given contract. Well, what incremental AI allowed us to do was set up almost a bubble, right? A little AI safety bubble where all the data and information was only from this law firm. It was insulated, it was incubated, right? And so from the insulated, incubated information, we were able to deploy AI to extract and pull and decipher and understand what it is that the contract said. So this gave the law firm the ability to say, oh my gosh, we didn't realize that that contract needed renewal. Or, oh my goodness, right? The client was absolutely right about, this SLA needing to be met. And therefore the fine is, absolutely enforceable, right? So there was material outcomes from just being able to extract data from contracts within an insulated and isolated way of approaching AI. So it's really, really interesting to see that even with the smallest of use case, the biggest of guardrails, and not even having to go to the World Wide Web, that you're able to actually extract from incremental AI what it is that you need, and you can make some powerful outcomes come to pass as a result of that. Differential AI, this is kind of where you begin to see this is the equivalent of A/B testing, if I were to translate it into marketing terminology. And this gives us the ability, like the example I gave, of understanding the competitive landscape. What are they doing versus what are we doing? And this requires a little bit more exposure. This does require an outside LLM. That's another conversation to kind of think through when you're planning your AI strategy. Are you going to buy large language models or are you going to borrow them? Right? Because there's some readily available open source all day long that can give you that competitive insight, benchmark data that you can kind of work against. But sometimes that might not be culturally fitting for your organization, depending on the type of sensitive data and the type of operations that you run. Right. So that's a decision point that needs to be made within the organization. But it really is a cool way and seeing very quickly what do we do versus what do they do? How do we scale? What do we do? And what decisions should we be making? Right. It also informs some of the large language models that should be used. I was on the phone the other day with Mike McGaw, who heads up the global intelligent automation practice at Blue Prism. And one of the things he said is that while, just like with the RPA movement, these banks and large global organizations, mostly in financial institutions and insurance, are beginning to consume, large language models. But what they're seeing very quickly is that, paying for that data across every single business line isn't necessarily cost effective, right? So sometimes it requires a hybrid model for differential AI for you to be able to borrow a little bit and buy a little bit to see what it is that's necessary and how it is that you're going to move forward, right? And all of these AI strategy readiness motion get us ready for the scaling, right? And that kind of comes next. Once you have a little taste of the throughput and the optimization and overall efficiencies that come with AI, it's a no-brainer, right? I sat in a group of CIOs in Mexico earlier this year, and there was about, I don't know, 70 or so CIOs in the room. And when I asked them where they were, in their journey of AI, most of them were in the data readiness, data consolidation phase, kind of thinking through what it was that they were going to do. But they had plans to scale AI by 2025. So this isn't one of those 3-year, 5-year, 10-year transformation programs. This is let's get it right. Let's understand what our governance is, and we're ready to scale by next year. So it really is in the planning and making sure that the oversight of what it is that you're going to do and how it is that your organization is going to behave in the age of AI that's going to dictate what you're ready for scale because it's going to come quickly. So one of the things that I really think is important, and I think that we all have a head start, coming from an RPA background, is being automation first, right? I don't think that changes. Having added an additional, technology to the stack doesn't mean that, that everything that we've done so far, the groundwork that we've laid to date, isn't important. I think all it means is that we need to shift our mindset a little bit to make sure that we're truly optimizing our programs, right? And so our intelligent automation programs, give us the ability to kind of take what we've gotten, already some of the value and like I said, infuse AI, raise those robots to the next level so that they're not only working with programmatic tasks and outcomes that we develop and say for it to do, that it also takes into consideration some of the infusion of AI and some of the tremendous amounts of data that now dictate how organizations should best optimize their offices, front offices, client facing moments, sales motions, contracts, even marketing outreach, right? So every single portion of the business is going to be affected, enhanced, and it's up to us, I think, as the ones, first on the scene to really take a peek at where that data lies and what it is that we can get out of it. One of the most important things to talk about at this point is to really think about what your management of TCO looks like. So total cost of ownership. Most of us as COE leaders, right? And I just help them, they're clients of mine, folks like you are trying to figure out how to reduce your footprint, right? And so it's really been an interesting conversation because about 5 years ago, I'd say that nobody in the COE world or, heads of automation wanted to listen to the story. Nobody wanted to hear, you can reduce your production support or you can actually incrementally decrease, your cost in licenses if your utilization gets better managed. Now I know, Jesse, I've had several interactions with him and there's a fantastic framework for how to manage, license consumption, utilization, and making sure that the best and brightest tools are being put on the scene at the right time. But not every organization is that sophisticated, right? And so one of the things that's really important is to reduce the footprint and free up budget. I'd encourage everybody to take a look at their pipeline for next round of builds for RPA, IA, document understanding, IDP, all of those, traditional automation, intelligent automation tools and take a peek and see if there's anywhere that AI could play, right? Because maybe it's an opportunity to do both, to maybe trial as you go, and to be the leader that begins to introduce this concept to your organization. There's a lot of teams that are actually moving to a managed service model. They're taking their licenses and the production support and saying, you guys do it. Companies like WonderBotz, we're taking it on every day. And it's not because they've given up or they don't want to do it. It's that they want to free up capital to be an AI innovation fund, to look towards Gen AI, to do the next shiny, bright new thing. Because the truth of the matter is that organizations are either they're elevating their COEs from what we've seen in the market, or there's data scientists or operations leaders or, AI specialists, frankly, that are being hired from the outside to come in and set the strategy. So what we've been helping our clients do is understand that they are just as responsible and just as qualified and capable of setting the strategy of how automation can turn into AI and how those types of capabilities can blend together in one unified budget. So, how do you find places, right, for incremental AI? So, this is something that's really easy to kind of turn on and acquire. And as a takeaway, I'll give Jesse my contact information to share with everybody. We're doing pilots across the board, across the globe. In fact, I was on an all hands call this morning, and we have offices opening in the Middle East, UK, and everybody's clamoring for how we're going to turn our COE into an AI powerhouse, right? And so that's exactly what we're being able to do. Like I said, AI infusion. It doesn't sound as wholesale, right? When you begin to infuse it slowly but surely. And so that's something that we've been leveraging, our tools and some of our proprietary LLM models to help clients kind of see, taste, touch, understand, and it's kind of back to that art of the possible all over again in some ways. And then in others, it's really taking a look at existing pipeline and saying, this is a really good AI opportunity, right? And so maybe we should try it there. Rationalizing the workload to prioritize AI capabilities. You have a heavy bench of employees that make up your COE. We've been encouraging clients to take a peek at, some of the alternatives to that, right? And looking at more of strategic roles for folks that have, AI capabilities, leadership, management. data scientists, data strategists. I think the BAs are rising even more than they were, before. A very important role to understand the business and translate it into tech terms. So really thinking through like what is it that we really want to have in house? Let's not be precious about keeping the lights on for our robotic process automation projects, right? There's tons of really low cost models, and ways that you can go about deferring that, break fix stuff, right? So that you can go back to kind of thinking through what the capabilities are that you want to in house. And that's really a new rationalization exercise that I think is incumbent on COE leaders to figure out how it is that they're going to be part of this story. Engaging with your peers. So I love things like this. I always say yes to things like this because I think it's so important to talk to peers, competitors, forums where it's a safe space to ask the silly questions, and I am a firm believer that there's no such thing as a silly question in the age of AI. This stuff comes at us so quickly. I have so many bookmarks open to get information, to get news, to see what people are doing. I keep very close eye on open source versus what Tesla's doing versus what Google's doing. I've even gotten excited about commercials again because I'm watching, my streaming shows and seeing, oh my goodness, like, this is really coming to pass. And they have, even the devices, to have that power. So if it's already in the consumer mindset, you can only imagine what's happening behind the scenes in back office, Fortune 500 companies, as folks are beginning to rise at the tide, and become part of this AI journey together. Asking business owners to identify pain points. So, from a new lens as an intelligent automation practitioner, it's not just, hey, how, again, I go back to that. How long does your close take? What are some of those financial processes that are kind of clunky and taking time? It's less about that and it's more about what kind of data do you need to see? What kind of insights from your existing operations would be helpful in making a strategic decision? Should Hershey's, acquire Dots and, make another candy empire? Maybe, maybe not. Recently they decided to get in on the pretzel game, right? And so they not only have candy, but they have pretzels and snacks. And so it's a whole new line of business that they're looking at, evaluating, strategizing around. So it's really important to understand what are the pain points, right? Do we have an imminent merge on the docket, right? Should we divest part of our organization? Data answers all those questions. So when going to leaders, when going to partners, when going to stakeholders, I encourage you to ask not only what are the pain points of yesterday, but what are the dreams of tomorrow? What would be awesome? What would make your job so much easier, right, Mr. or Mrs. Leader? Right. And let me help you see where we can apply this awesome new technology to expose and extract data that we're already sitting on, right? We probably already have the answers. It's just not in a consumable form. So that's one of the important things that I think, intelligent automation practitioners and leaders can do. And then, of course, taking a look at your existing processes and see where AI can mitigate some of those loopholes, right? So where we traditionally had to connect the dots of multiple tools, multiple systems, today we're able to say, all right, let's not focus on the systems, the features, the functions. Let's do the throughput first and then see where it is that AI can kind of mitigate that risk and or triage, an email and or, think through what the strategy of our next line of business is going to be. The sky's the limit. It's really up to us. And we've had this beautiful, front row seat to what organizations are doing, what kind of crowdsourcing pipeline opportunities they want in AI or what they wanted in automation. Well, let's translate that to AI, right? I think that's a wonderful opportunity, and a career path that I see truly budding for COE leaders. And that's what we're doing today is doing our best to help evangelize the message that AI is not as scary as you might think. Help leaders like you share and take this stuff back to your organizations and really find poignant places where you can help deliver the message that AI is here. We need to figure out how to play nice with it, right? And we want to turn our COE leaders into AI heroes. Don't let another department take this charge. This is 100% in your wheelhouse, in your lap. And folks like Jesse, organizations like this, groups like, intelligent automation user groups and companies like WonderBotz are all here to help turn COE leaders into AI heroes. And with that, here's some contact information should you guys be interested in connecting. And I'm happy to take questions.
Great. Is there any questions? If you want to put them in the chat, that'd be great. And I can write them out. One question I had for you, Paula, was what are some of the biggest challenges that you had, or rather that you've seen in organizations that are actually looking to adopt AI?
Yeah. So I think the most common challenge is alignment, right? I mean, very much like what we saw in automation. It's, well, we want to use this LLM because we really need to expose competitor data. Well, that's really expensive to just do one use case, right? And so really rationalizing who's going to use what and what use case, that's sort of the beginning part, right? And so that's why we really encourage these committees to come together so that you have representation from different lines of business to come up with a point of view. And like I said, there's multiple ways to kind of go about it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start in one particular area. It could be multiple. There could be a large language model that actually gives information, intel, or data that could help multiple lines of business. So it's really coming up with alignment. And then I think close second, if I might add that as well, is security concerns, which is natural. It's also something, just in general with IT projects and with things that affect the core processes of a business, there's always going to be a little bit of a concern or trepidation on how it is that we're going to manage the data security, data privacy, that our stuff isn't getting out there and that other people's stuff isn't getting in here, right? So those are kind of the two questions that we often get to combat, as folks are trying to address, the AI question.
hmm Yeah, we find a lot. I've had tons of discussions between privacy risk and then naturally the internal access controls and whatnot over our projects. We're kind of working on a couple different POCs, and it's taken time, a lot of time, from the
Yeah,
OCFDs, and then secondly, just general awareness for a lot of people aren't sure what the heck these technologies do and how the risks that are implicit.
exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
What are a
So,
few emerging trends? Oh, sorry, I see that Jenny's got a question. Sounds like the traditional IT can't stay in the ivy tower or ivory tower that they need to go out to the business to understand their need and help them adopt AI and find good business cases to use AI.
yeah, Jenny, I think that's a great point. I love that though. I'm like picturing Rapunzel, right? In this
That's right.
ivory tower and let down your long hair, right? So yeah, absolutely. I think what we've been trying to do, that illustration that I gave of the evolution of automation, I think paints that picture that what we've been striving to do for a very long time, just like sales and marketing have always tried to figure out where they find their connection point. I think IT and the business are in that same perpetual attempt to understand each other's side, right? And so automation, I think, was the great democratization of, technology. And it gave finance leaders, RPA gave finance leaders. I mean, like I have clients that were internal audit turned COE leader, right? I'm sure many of you have been in different businesses and then you just suddenly became part of the automation charge. And so it gave us this connectivity that, began to translate into outcomes and what can we do together? And okay, but I don't know how to connect the dots there. I don't know what systems I need to plug in. I don't know how much cloud space that's going to take, right? And so this partnership began to emerge with business saying, I need technology, and IT saying, well, let me show you how that works, right? And so I really think that, that if IT would be the leader and say, okay, I don't want to stay in my little box. Let me come out. Let me get out there. Let me talk to the people and come to people like me. I love translating IT to business, right? That's what I do. That's why I'm the storyteller of the organization I'm in. It's really about understanding how to transmit that message. And if you say it right, business leaders are going to be reasonable, right? Hey, that's great that you want that tool, but we have two others that do kind of something similar. Can we take a peek and make sure that this isn't fitting the bill? Right? And what are the true requirements? Because it's possible that we already have something here that works, right? And that you guys just don't know it, but let me teach you about what our tech stack is, right? So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the IT departments, the CIOs and the CTOs to elevate to a place of partnership and to really transmit that tribal knowledge that they've had about how systems and connectivity and cloud and data governance all come to pass in an organization in a way that we can really use, leverage, and prepare for AI.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mike's got a comment with regard to test plans. The better the test plan, the better the solution. And I find in our organization, there is definitely a lot of synergy between the standard kind of and how AI can kind of be incorporated into that, which does mitigate a lot of the risks of AI, which I think people miss. It's like, wait, no,
Yes.
this is new. Yeah. Any comments, Paula?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are heavy delivery, we do it all day, every day. So, thinking through how it is that you're going to go about it, that's why I spent so much time on strategy, right? Especially because this is supercharged. So back in the 90s, when people were considering an ERP system, right? And they were thinking that through, it was like, all right, this little plug is going to go here. This is going to connect to that. And then this cloud supports Europe, but then our India practice needs this, right? The considerations were tremendous, that needed to be mapped. And then you were still on this assessment phase for probably about a year out of a 10-year engagement. All right. The speed of how deployments are going is so much faster. So while I don't think you should spend, be an analysis paralysis, as some consultants say, right, and just pause and, oh my gosh, are we doing it the right way? I don't think you need to be that, mindful and cautious. But at the same time, understand that the implementation and scale is going to happen faster than your little brain can process, right? And so really thinking through the test, understanding how you're going to lay the foundation. What is the break fix going to be? If something goes wrong, what's our plan B? What's the fail safe? How do we keep the lights on? How do we keep the operations flowing? All of those preparations I think are truly important, more so than ever, just because of the speed of deployment, right? We don't have as many, fail safes and timelines, to kind of preserve that testing and then that, even regression testing, like tapping into, I mean, all of that's so fast, there's even AI for testing. We have an offering called testing as a service. You can have all of your Stoic systems tested for AI readiness in a matter of weeks. We had 14 done in 3 days, and we're like, are you kidding me? So even testing's getting faster. So that's really crucial, Mike, to really understand how you're going to approach it, what the strategy is, because it's going to take a life of its own. And it's our job to kind of guardrail it like a toddler, like make sure that we have the guardrails of how we're going to approach it. Great point.
Mhm. Yeah. And one quick comment is that in the organization here, my team is actually looking at using an external third party API to actually provide some AI functionality. And then I was talking to another group and he's like, well, we're kind of testing it on prem. And I'm like, let's both test. Like, because some of these things, like you
Yes.
can't actually invest, or my point is like organizationally, I think it's important that we build more and more awareness. And in the case of a lot of these technologies, you try them for one use case and maybe they work for a different one. And so building that organizational awareness at this point is really fundamental. We need to start playing with this stuff a lot more. So
Totally agree.
is there any emerging trends in AI and automation that you think organizations should get prepared for now? Like certainly Gen AI is the hot topic right now. Is there any other kind of areas that you think? um,
Yeah. I,
you-
I think workforce planning, like I'm always about the people, right? So I'm a technologist. I live, breathe it, sell it. It's what pays my bills, being in technology. But at the end of the day, technology is only as good as the people operating it, understanding it, and executing.
Mhm.
So I think more than ever, the preparedness of organizations, not only are all these little pieces that I talked about today in strategy of AI, what to plan for and all that kind of stuff, is my workforce ready? And WonderBotz, we just did a complete overhaul, of understanding what competencies were, what capabilities were, what potential was for all of our employees to really understand that they're ready for tomorrow, because it's less and less about, optimizing, digital workers or robots, whatever platform your preference is. It's about understanding what the throughput is, what the governance is, and if we're in a tech ready mindset. So biggest trend that I see of organizations that are like, okay, I'm past pilot, we're about to do this thing. It's a workforce planning exercise. Do we have the right people in house? What are we going to borrow? What are we going to outsource? Where are we going to get the talent to get this done in the most cost effective way? And I think that segues into Jenny's question here of how do you define the use of AI as a success? And at the end of the day, the success is whatever you choose your leveraging marker is, right? That you have to agree upon at the beginning. So if it's a cost reduction, well then success means that it's saved you money and that the ROI is there. If it's improved efficiencies, then yes, your example of 100% of the problem would definitely win over the 80%, challenge there. And then absolutely, because an AI answer can be a hallucination. Well, guess what? Humans don't always answer correctly either, right? I think we actually have a far bigger track record of getting it wrong than we do getting it right. So when thinking through success of an AI solution, I think at this phase, I might have a different answer in 2025. So maybe I'll come back and we'll kind of see where we're at. But right now, today, I think a successful AI implementation is one that's done. Because right now, if you are not trying, you are behind. And if you don't innovate, it's the end of your organization as you know it. We're seeing organizations just get gobbled up. The M&A activity is tremendous right now because organizations that have an automation first mindset are gobbling up the little minnows, understanding that they can take the clients, they can take the competencies, and they can apply it somewhere else, but that they really are the future because they're AI ready. So, I foresee, preparing with back offices that don't have a ton of people. I foresee a change in the BPO landscape, that we're not outsourcing as much, that we're doing what WonderBotz calls the digital cloud. So we call it digital BPO. It's no longer that you're outsourcing to India or Costa Rica, for a low cost, center, so to speak, or to increase efficiencies. It's that you're outsourcing to the cloud. So I think groups like this and people like us are at the cutting edge of changing the landscape of business. And that's the biggest trend that I see is that we are back to a place of getting that workforce management and the true future of work understood to align to this age of AI.
I love Jenny's comment too with regard to the issue of hallucination, and it is
Oh,
definitely a prevalent issue in the context of Gen AI. And I think the only way to mitigate that today is really to adopt for the specific cases where you're not able to actually accept the risk of the hallucination, and having a human sit in front of that and then ultimately make the decision. But for sure, that
great
is.
questions.
Karen's got a question. How do you deal with the business that just wants to jump in using AI because it's trending? And I think
Oh
that's
my
more
God.
like
I
that's
know.
it's fun.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. So no, that's a great question. I love this question. Actually, send me an email and I'll send you. I have a slide on that too. So, so it's kind of like the metaphor that I always use is a toolbox, right? And I'm not going to use a screwdriver to hammer a nail, and vice versa. I'm not going to use a hammer to, pull a staple out of the wall. Right. And so it's again, I can't stress it enough. It's on us to rise to the occasion to be the great educators in the age of AI and have folks understand that yes, while it's shiny, and yes, this could be a great, approach to it. It's going to cost X amount of dollars and X amount of time. Use data when you're talking to your business leaders. That's probably my best advice is, when they're coming at you and saying, no, I want to use AI for this. All right, fabulous. But AI is going to take this long, this many test cycles, because it's a very simple use case where I could get this off the ground, in 1 week, tested, and then tried and out the door in production in 3. Right. So use data to educate why some of the tools that we have in our toolbox are better served for different use cases. Data always speaks, time to value always speaks, and use your knowledge. You know how this stuff works, right? So I mean, why go down a path of piloting something when you could get the same outcome of something that's tried and true and already installed in your organization? So while I'm a proponent for AI and say start, if there's an easier, simpler way to get the same outcome, you go with it.
Mhm. Mike's got a good point here. Just don't abandon all your processes and race forward. Jump into it thoughtfully. I think
Exactly.
it's a really good point.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank-
that's good. I think that's the main questions I see here. So thanks so much for joining us today, Paula.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's super great to see. Your decks are always polished, and I appreciate your time. I know that you're always around the world and doing everything, and I know you're sharing that you're in Denver today. So it's nice to see you in the same time zone, which is great.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. No, and I appreciate this, Jesse. And thanks to folks like you kind of putting these together. Because again, I think it's so important for us to continue having these conversations. What are you hearing? What am I hearing? What are the analysts hearing? Right. And then there's a big difference and a jump. I think a couple of people alluded to it of the buzzword, the hype versus the practical application and what's really happening. Right. And I think it's important for us to know that and continue talking about it. So I hope to connect with all of you. Find me on LinkedIn. I'll give Jesse my contact information. Feel free to reach out. My calendar link is always available if you want to throw time on it. And if you're, interested in piloting or taking advantage of some of the areas that we've seen kind of these baby steps, because that's the way we're rolling, I'm happy to help you guys, kind of put together a business case for that too.
Great, thank you. Well, everyone,
All right.
thanks so much. Check out Bits for About Bots, which is one of the video work that basically WonderBotz does. Check out WonderBotz. Check out Paula on LinkedIn. If you're interested and you enjoyed this podcast, check out the Intelligent Automation News website. Just Google it or check it out on YouTube. And next session is going to be in September, unless anyone else is interested in speaking with Banner Health. Susie Dax going to be coming in and doing a presentation, which will be interesting. So thanks, everyone. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the invite, Jesse. All right. Bye.